Well, a resolution isn't a question of the state. So
Okay, so
be
we're
it
saying that,
resolved that-
yes.
Be it resolved that,
Income inequality negatively impacts long-term
so the affirmative statement is inequality negatively impacts economic growth. So it's a little tricky. It's a double negative.
Yeah, we have to be careful.
It's a double negative. All right, sounds fun. Oh, by the way, all kinds of stuff in the news. So it was a very topical issue, right? And did you guys see the article I put up on Connect for you?
Did you put it up on Connect? I can find it the first time.
Yeah, we
That's why you should be reading Connect once in a while. Okay? Maybe reconnect with Connect. Yeah, there's a big article on it.
Yeah, NASA was a good. Right.
So I assume you guys are Jason, Eve, and Christine? Christine.
Okay, so,
You are Christian.
I have a question. So if you look at the graph, you can see that there's two major peaks in income inequality, which we have gone by looking at the top 1% share in income. This is for the United States. So the first spike was in 1929 with the Great Depression, and the second spike of almost equal magnitude was in
How are we
2007.
measuring inequality? Just take me back, because I'm not an expert on it.
How are we measuring?
Yes. What's up
There
here?
are a lot of different ways to measure it. One
Share
of
of total income accruing to each group.
So each income bracket, the share of the total country's wealth. So the black line represents 1%, blue line represents between 1% and 5%, and red represents
Wait,
between
I don't get this guy.
So if you look at the black line there, that shows how much of the total income of the United States was taken home by 1% of the
the top
population.
1%.
The top 1%. So in 1929, the top 1% of Americans were taking home 24% of.
Okay, so in 2000, around 2008, top 1% had about 25% of, we're taking home 25% of GDP.
Yeah.
And then the next two lines.
And then the blue line is for the top 5, oh, between 1 and 5.
So, yeah.
20% income loan people.
Well, income equals expenditures, circular flow diagram. And the red line is top 5 to 10. Okay. So what does the graph tell us? It tells us that
This is
a
one
heck of a lot of
ways-
the pie is going
Yeah.
to very few people.
It's one of the ways, one of the more reliable ways to measure income, the income disparity.
Income inequality.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, is it suggested that in 1998 and 2008, the income inequality really spiked? The two lines there on the right hand
Yeah,
side.
there are
And
a lot
somehow,
of small
and is that
spikes.
related to
but-
economic growth? So when there's high income inequality in 98 and 2008, so there's high inequality, did GDP fall?
Well, we're looking at long-term.
No, but that's my question. In 98 and 2008, when there was high inequality, was there a drop in the rate of growth of GDP or something like that? Your thesis is inequality,
Yeah,
which is the spike, leads to decreased economic growth. Okay. So is that substantiated by the data?
Yes.
yeah.
Okay. So we've got the left-hand side, the inequality. Where's the data that shows that there was a drop in economic growth for those two peak periods?
Well, a lot of times they weren't immediate. Like when, as you'll see, there are a lot of long-term effects.
You're leading off to that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, why don't we just let them build on it and
We
everything?
got a lot of talk.
Okay. So I'm going to have two questions that hanging out there. One, you have to prove to me that those two peaks caused a decrease in economic growth. And secondly, you have to prove to me that the causal arrow is inequality leads to decreased growth rather than decreased growth leads to inequality. Okay.
So basically, we have the two coincidences between the 1929 spike in inequality and the 2007 spike, which both happened right around the two major recessions of the last century. So from 1976 until 2006, where the U starts to curve upwards, half of real income gains in the USA went right to the top 5%. So there was just a massive accumulation of wealth, of too much wealth into few hands.
In your opinion.
In many people's hands. There's one who was the lead economist of the World Bank, Branko Milanovic, and in his book he says that massive accumulation of wealth is just too much money in too few hands, that it cannot be profitably employed. And that basically just means that the large amounts of wealth concentrated in so few hands, it results in large and unpredictable investments, and that just leads to unstable markets. Another related reason is based on the relative income hypothesis, which is just keeping up with the Joneses. Your spending is relative to the spending of society. So if the gap increases between the middle and upper class, the middle class will spend more relatively. So they want to spend relatively more with relatively less money. And this led to, they wanted more purchasing power because wages had stagnated before the 2007 recession. And that led to politicians and economists, they wanted them to have more increasing access to credit, and that led to the housing bubble collapse, ultimately the Great Recession.
Secondly, income inequality causes major social problems, such as like neighborhoods divided by poor neighborhoods would become breeding grounds for epidemic diseases, gangs and crimes as well. Issues like these affect political stability and require actions by the local government that are likely to be opposed by some. Crime rates are positively correlated with income inequality, which means that if one of them rises, the other will also rise. So using this graph, you can see that this one is homicides per million people. And you can see that Japan has the lowest income inequality.
Yeah, I read this, and this is really interesting, actually. Sorry for interrupting, but it's just so much fun. You're arguing that homicides decrease as income inequality decreases.
Yes.
Are there any confounding variables, other variables that could justify the fact that, or cause Japan's low homicide rate, other than income inequality? Of course there are.
It's not just Japan.
Yeah.
It's
No, but I want to deal with
there's-
Japan as an example. So you're arguing that Japan's homicide rates are low, therefore their society is much better off
Yeah.
because they have low income inequality. Everyone's kind of flattened out. Everybody makes the same amount of money.
Yeah.
Could there be other reasons why they have a great society with low homicides per million?
No, definitely.
Of course.
Yeah.
So this proves nothing.
We're looking at a correlation. I mean, when there's higher income inequality, when people have less money, there's more. I mean, homicides it's an externality.
Well, let's compare Canada and Japan. I mean, Canada, from your graph, has higher income inequality and higher homicides, but we also have higher immigration. my understanding, they did a study a while ago, 50% of violent or crimes with violence in Canada are perpetrated by people from Vietnam. Now, whether that's right or wrong, that's what they said. Now, the argument could be, well, those people are coming from a war-torn community and country, right? So obviously, they're going to have a little bit of different approach to life than people who've grown up in Canada and the U.S. So obviously, Canada's going to have a higher homicide rate because we're taking in immigrants. Japan hasn't let one immigrant in. So they're going to have a lower homicide rate. So I don't know what this proves.
Well,
Italy, look at Italy. Well, Italy has mafia. It's not dependent upon income inequality.
you can pick apart,
Well, the mafia are rich and they abuse the poor.
Yeah, or they have, what do they call it, vendetta values, right?
you can pick apart individual comparisons, but I think taken as a whole, it still means something.
Yeah.
What does it mean?
It means that overall, higher income inequality leads to higher homicide rates. Like individual comparisons, yeah, you might be able to point to variable Y that might explain some of the difference, but I think you can't do that for every single comparison.
So why does Canada and Australia, which are relatively the same type of countries, sort of a British heritage, they have equal homicide rates, but Australia is 25%, 1/3 higher on income inequality? Which kind of is shocking, actually.
In addition to that, how much does USA skew the graph, right?
That's another very good point. I missed that, I didn't even see you.
You guys figure it out.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you take USA out, how much does that line flatten? And we all know what the problems of the states are, and they're not necessarily income inequality, right? You name it, it's a
So
problem.
you're saying you take that outlier off,
Sure.
and that line's gonna flatten out?
Well, you can
Yeah.
Slightly
That's a very good point.
increasing.
look how many dogs are below the line, right?
I mean, it starts screaming third variable as well. Like, I mean, it isn't just, it's definitely.
That's like compounding variable,
Yeah.
right, third variable, compounding variable,
Yeah.
excluded variable.
Can we get on to our third point?
Okay, so this, we're gonna throw this one out.
No. What we have here is we have obviously some relation between income inequality and homicide rates.
I won't
It's also the
concede this,
externality.
and I'm sure they will not concede.
And it's not just homicide rates, this is just one graph, it's all crime rates are increased with higher income inequality. This is just one example.
I don't think the negative side will concede that issue. But we'll move on.
Okay.
Yeah, it's.
Move on.
Okay, so inter-regional income inequality, such as that in the United States, negatively impacts economic growth in two ways. Firstly, through the spending habits of different socioeconomic classes. So the rich and poor spend their money differently. Research has shown the rich save a much higher proportion of their money than the poor. The top fifth of income distribution is estimated to save as much as 25% of their income, compared to a nearly 0 saving percent rate of the bottom fifth of income distribution. So this difference leads to lower consumption when money is concentrated in wealthy individuals, as they save a lot of their money, which is usually idle capital.
Could you I read this too, and I found this an interesting argument. So, number one, income inequality leads to social degradation is questionable, in my mind. Not in your mind, but they're going to deal with that. Second argument is income inequality leads to a lot of rich people with a lot of idle money that they have to invest, and that's bad.
Well, some of it is invested, but
I would actually argue that investment is more helpful for economic growth than consumption.
this circles
You go
back
buy
to-
an apple and you've bought an apple. You go invest in a new machine and you can triple and quadruple output. So I would think that having more rich people is a good idea, not a bad idea.
That circles back to his argument as when you hit a certain point, there's so much capital that rich people have to compete for investment, and they start taking large risks and invest in questionable savings accounts such as in 2008, and this can lead to bubbles and eventually economic crisis.
Well, in 2008, it wasn't a problem of too many rich people having too much money. It was
But that's what we're arguing, is that it was. That was the ultimate cause, was there was too many rich people, too few rich people with too much money, who were spending.
Oh, that was caused by subprime mortgage. That was caused by greedy.
Why were they forcing those subprime mortgages? Because
They weren't forced, they were.
oh well, okay. Why did they? Because they wanted to get return on their investment.
they're trying to.
And with so many other investors, so many other hedge funds competing, to get a good return on their money, they had to make riskier and riskier investments. Otherwise, investors wouldn't get a return. If there's so much capital accumulated and so much free capital accumulated, why would you bother going to this guy at like a 3% return? You can go to this guy and get a 7% return. Well, 7% is way riskier and it's going to lead to crisis.
They could have invested abroad.
Hey,
Let
let's
them
let
do
them
their
do
job.
their job for them, so let's let them talk and let them.
Do you have any